All right. Back on it again. Day 7. Hello, Nikki. How are you? I want to see if I can keep chat on my other screen today. Oh, I'm not even signed in on that computer. Oh, well. So won't. Night Owl shirt. Yes. Night Owl shirt. Night Owl theme. Night Owl everything. Just Night Owled out. I'll do Night Owl. Night Owl's so good. May I request benchmarks today? Yes, you can. Let's take a look. I actually read the problem already because I saw some people talking about it. You kind of want to see the part 2 results. You want to see the part 2 results for what, the naive solution, or just like in general? Also, today is crabs, so I had to read the problem before we started because, you know, doing it in Rust, got to read the problem if it's crabs. Hey, Derek, how's it going? Good to see you. A swarm of crabs, each in its own tiny submarine. I need that to be like the open graph image for like one day I will write a blog post on like how to solve day 7, and it needs to be just like Ferris and a bunch of mini little submarines. Okay, so basically the thing here is that we have a bunch of numbers, so a bunch of positions, just like we did, I don't know, yesterday, the day before, something like that. Bevy project for Ferris and submarines. That could be like a, you know, one of those like side scroller shooter thingies. You could be like, I don't know. You could be Ferris in a submarine, or you could be like shooting, like the enemies coming at you could all be Ferris and submarines. I don't know. Worth doing for sure. We've got a bunch of horizontal positions. You saw a paper on day 7 on the subreddit. We could take a look at that. If you have a link to the paper, we could definitely like bring it up, because I do have some experience reading academic papers and stuff. This means there's a crab with horizontal position 16, a crab with horizontal position 1, and so on. So basically what we have is like this test input, which I will pull over into our thing over here. Part 1, test input, paste. This does the same thing we did yesterday, right? Or was it the day before? I forget. All of the days rolled together at some point. It was yesterday. So we did a vector queue yesterday. I don't know that we need to do one today. We don't need to like move stuff. So maybe we'll just stick it in an array or something. Or map. A map probably works better for us because we don't really care about all the empty spots, right? So the thing here is that we've got like a crab in spot 16, 1, 2, 0, 4, 2, 7, 1, 2, 14. And then we have to figure out like what position they all need to get to, but in the least amount of moves. So the naive solution will be to just like pick all of the spots that start at 0 and end at whatever and range through them, and then calculate how far away everything is, and then add that number up and see what it is. So that's probably what we're going to start with. I saw there's also a Gauss distribution that we can do today. Crab paper. Let me pull Reddit up in a different window, just in case. Wrote a full paper. Is this on Imager? Oh, that's so weird. They uploaded images of a PDF? That is awkward. That is very awkward. On the unreasonable efficacy of the mean in minimizing the fuel expenditure of crab submarines is the name of the paper. That's part 2 stuff. Okay, so we'll keep this for part 2, and then we'll keep going with the naive solution for the moment. So this input results in the cheapest possible outcome being 37. So let's start with that. So this will be 37. We don't have another thing to test. The comments have a real PDF, which is way less awkward. Yeah. I mean, it's like a 4-page paper apparently, so I don't think it's a real paper. Not to put down the work. But it's just 1 or 2 equations as far as I can tell. It's not really like I did research and a conclusion and whatever. Okay, so we've got fishes. We don't need to pass in this number anymore, so I'm going to take this out of the arguments. The puzzle input here, with the input that we have, should return 37. Currently, we'll get rid of this, and we'll do cargo test bin part 1. Couldn't find it because I'm never in the right directory. Professional programmer, never in the right directory. Right, we don't have a 0 to 9 anymore. We have a separated list. Let's get rid of this. Let's do... I guess we're going to do like a B-tree map. Right. We'll let mute map equals this. Map is going to be a B-tree map of values. What? I guess just like... I can't imagine that it would be a U64 position here. Also, the input is comma separated, yes. So we're just going to store the position on the left, so like 16, and then the number of crabs on the right. The number of crabs will be whatever. Hey, Jacob, good to see you. Let's check our puzzle input, just scan it quickly. It looks like the only number we get up to here is like 1100, 1400 right there. But still 4 digits total. I don't see anything that's like 5 or more. So this can be like U16 or something like that instead. I doubt we'll hit U64 here for the values, like the number of crabs. I think the total number of crabs in the input that we just looked at, I mean, this can't be more than like 1,000, right? So maybe we do U16 here too. And we just say that's that. And then we do map.entry. We have to parse this first, right? So we're parsing these into U8s. This needs to be actually a U16. So we're going to pull in these numbers, comma separated. Is that a map of final position total cost? That is a map of initial position. total number of crabs. Yeah, it looks like it's mostly a proof that bounds the answer based on the mean. Interesting. It's interesting. That's all I'll say. So map is a B-tree map where the first U16 is the first position of the crab. So a crab starts at like 16, or a crab starts at 8, or a crab starts at whatever. We could do this actually. I think that works, right? Did I mess up the way to do this? I guess it can just be a struct, right? Struct initial position, num crabs, and we can just like basically document our code by using types. So map.entry, the entry is going to be initial position. We're not looping here. For there's probably an itertools for this, isn't there? Itertools Rust group I think that's one of the most interesting parts of Rust type, tuple, and enum system is that you can sort of alias types into human readable names. Yes, definitely. The thing that I just did there, if you are interested, is called like a new type pattern. Because what we've done here is basically we've created a new type that is a wrapper around like a U16 or something, but it is effectively just a U16. So Rust new type pattern. Basically, just create a struct that is a tuple struct that wraps your value, and then you can do whatever you want on that struct. So you can do additional impulse. This really helps if you're dealing with like the orphan rule, which is you can't implement a third-party trait for a third-party type. We do this in Rust Adventure for a Pokemon ID type that is a KSUID that needs to implement like, I forget what the trait is called, but it's like toSQL from SQL X or something like that, or from SQL. So what I do is we take, instead of years here, we do a Pokemon ID, and inside, instead of an I64, we have a KSUID struct, and that allows us to do an impl for like toSQL on Pokemon ID, but use the KSUID like internals to do it. I prefer the struct my type U16 versus the option of type my type equals U16. I don't know that type my type actually works in Rust. I think that was a thing that I did. So like Haskell new type has a couple of keywords, and they use new type and data and type for different things. And I think that was just a leftover from when I did that. I don't see many people using like type aliases, right? So type alias Rust. And that's what that is. So type alias is the thing that will do like this point here is just a tuple, right? It's basically the same thing. So you can pass it a tuple, and you can operate on tuples and things like that, and it doesn't really stop you from doing things. But the new type pattern requires that you wrap your value in something. So you can use the new type pattern instead of the type alias pattern, which is the struct thing versus type thing. You can use the new type pattern to initialize a value with a struct that is a private struct. So that means you can offer through your API a set of functions that are the only ways to initialize a private struct type, which means that if you need to do something to convert something from like an integer to an ID or something like that, you know that the only way that you can do that is by using one of these like provided initialization functions, because the struct itself is private. I don't think you can make types private, type aliases private. Because the way they work is basically, it's basically pass through, right? So I think we have to sort before we group by for this implementation. Is there just group in here? I don't want this. Give me group. This is iter tools. I don't want iter tools. I want Rust iter or e-teacher. There we go. Why do we have an iterator for group by but not? How do we get group by? Oh, it's nightly only. Okay, so we're pulling in iter tools basically. Isn't B-tree map iter pre-sorted? That's a great question. I know it's consistent. I know that the iteration, like if you do B-tree map.iter, you get the same result for the same B-tree map every time, whereas that's not quite true in hash map. But I actually don't know what order that's guaranteed to be. Get an iterator over the entries of map sorted by key. Okay. So it is sorted. Perfect. Yay for using the right data structure. So we don't need to sort. We just do... Wait, that's not what I was looking for. Sorry, the question confused me because we're not actually iterating over the B-tree map. We are iterating over the input to collect into the B-tree map. But I guess if we just insert, that works too. So because it's sorted, we can do for, these are not fish, are they? Crabs. For crab in crabs, map.entry, initial position, crab.parse.unwrap. What are we doing for here? 16? Or insert 1 and modify the plus equals 1. You already parsed it? I did already parse it, you're right. I woke up today, I was reading the question, I was like, my brain isn't working, and that's clearly the way things are happening today. Okay, so initial position crab's already parsed, or insert 1. So that should give us the B-tree map, right? This will have to be num. Sam got no sleep last night. I saw that. I'm sorry to hear that, Derek. Doesn't this insert a 2 on the first crab? I don't think so. I think I need to put n modify first, but what is going on here? Did I leave type in here? I didn't leave type in here. Oh no, I'm looking at the wrong. 1 of 7 possible tokens. For crab and crabs. I'm missing one of these. There we go. I'm gonna get rid of this for a second. Just to use 16s. B-tree map not found in the scope. Please pull in. Yes, okay. I wonder why there's a B-tree map in NOM. Actually, let's go look at that for a second, if y'all don't mind. This is the wrong thing. NOM Rust. NPM Rust? Eesh. NOM Rust. So let's do B-tree map here. Is it not public? It keeps telling me that this is available. It's done this multiple days now. NOM lib standard collections B-tree map. Modules, lib, standard. Internal standard exports for no standard compatibility. So there's nothing that's actually here that we can use. So it's not actually like a different B-tree map or like something we can collect into. I think it's just a collection of basically all of the stuff that allocates and stuff that you would not use if you were doing no standard. Derive debug on initial position. Orb. I think we also have to do equality for ord, right? It would be interesting to figure out how to parse NOM values into other data structures. We've done that though. Like the thing that we do here, which is pull values in, right, via NOM, is the way that you parse them into other data structures. It sounds weird because you expect that to be like a built-in part of the library or something like that, but you can just like loop over until you're at the end, and just keep inserting that into like a B tree map. Like we did that yesterday, right? Like we wanted an array. I didn't click the right thing. Let's go to day 6, lib. We did that yesterday, right? So we have this separated list, but we also just have this array here. And like we could manually do an iter here and do basically like digit tag as the parser and just keep taking and taking and taking and taking and then discarding and then inserting that into the array instead. But it's basically, it's the same thing, right? There's no like special magic sauce to it. It's just build up the struct as you want it to be built up, or built up the data structure. Lib, this is a reference to the map used here after move because I'm debugging it. Can't leak private type because this is not pub. Okay, so we end up with 0, 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 4, 1, 7, 1, 14, 1, and then 16, 1. Where's our input? So 16 appears once, 14 appears once, 7 appears once, 4 appears once, 2 appears 3 times, 1 appears 2 times, and 0 appears once. So we're good. Let's do num crabs now. I usually don't type things out this this intensely, I guess. Is that because deref? Can we derive at a sign? Can I just like let's do this. Rust new type transparent. I don't think that this is specifically what I want. Repr transparent basically discards the struct at runtime. I definitely appreciated the typing thing super explicitly. Helps a lot to follow along. Yeah, for sure. And I'm happy to do it. Let's do... We can't do v.0 plus equals 1. Crabs 1. Mr. Krabs. Okay, so we're good. So we basically just dereference into the new type struct, which is a tuple struct. So we access the value inside of it with .0, and then we can use the binary assignment because now we're operating on the U16 type. So that constructs correctly. And now in our process function, we need to crabs.iter. Actually, we don't need a crabs.iter, do we? Actually, yes, we do. So we need to find the min and the max, I think. Because the bounds here are going to be... I think we have to use min by for the moment. So because we have the new types, we'll use min by instead. And this will be, what is it, num crabs. I think we can do the same thing for max by, right? Not found in this scope. Perfect. Puzzle input num crabs. So if we want to deal with this outside of the module, we do have to make the interior value public. Did I not make this a tuple? I thought that was a 2-argument function. I guess not. Expected closure that takes 2 distinct arguments. Yes. That's what I thought it was. So why is it complaining? Let's open this up a little bit. Expected tuple found struct num crabs. Oh, right, because we're iterating over the whole thing. My bad. Because this is actually this. Right. So we have a tuple, and the tuple is the keys and the values from the B-tree map, not just the num crabs. And it all runs, and let's check min and max here for kicks. Initial position 0, 1, initial position 2, 3. That doesn't seem right. Can we do... Is it sorted by the key? It's sorted by the keys, right? When we iter. So if we do this and we do this, we do that instead. We can do that instead. So initial position 0, initial position 16. So just a little trick, because we used the right data structure, that is the B-tree map, which gives us the keys in sorted position already. The first item in the iterator is the minimum key value. The last item in the iterator is the maximum key value. So we get to just pluck the next one and then pluck the last one, and we're done. And we don't actually have to sort or do anything. Okay, so we've got minimum and maximum, and then for min dot dot max, I think it's dot equals max probably. Let's do this. Dot iter. Dot map position. So the problem with the min by and the max by was that it calculated the min and the max of the key, not the value, right? No, it calculated the value, not the key. The other way around, basically. When I did min by and max by, I copied and pasted from the documentation. The documentation expects that you're doing it off like the value or whatever. So when I inserted the initial position, I ignored it instead. Then we sorted on the value. The value was the number of crabs, therefore it wasn't the right one. We needed to be doing it on the keys. because the keys are the positions of the crabs, and that's what we need the min and the max of. So we've got min and max. This gives us the position. We should do... I guess we could clone this. Right, we'd be cloning it for every single time, which I guess is okay, but like, we could do a reference too, right? We don't actually ever need to mutate crabs, do we? Now that I think about it. We don't even need to do this either. I think that'll still work for us. Something isn't working. Do we need to intuiter arrange? I see that, Nikki. I see you rocking the crab rave. We unwrap this and we unwrap that because they both exist. What am I doing down here? Let me deal with that in a second. So we still have 0 and we still have 16. So basically all I did is I pulled the iterator off to calculate the min and the max. So now we still have crabs up here. And I'm not creating 2 iterators, I only have the one. Min dot equals max. What's the actual problem here? Method cannot be called on range inclusive due to unsatisfied trait bounds, doesn't satisfy iterator. So do we have to intuiter on ranges? Why am I not iterating over ranges? Is the issue that I'm propagating the mutability? No, that doesn't seem to be the issue. What am I doing? Why is my brain not working? Well, when your brain doesn't work, you head to Google. Works for for loops. For loops are backed by iterators. A range is an iter. Yes. Is it a range inclusive issue? Yes, it should work. That's why I'm confused. What did I do? The method map exists for range. We need this to be inclusive anyway, so I'm going to kick it back to inclusive. Unsatisfied trait bounds. What are the unsatisfied trait bounds? Range inclusive doesn't satisfy iterator. I can't check the types because Rust Analyzer decided it didn't want to behave. I rely so heavily on Rust Analyzer these days. And when it breaks, I like lose all semblance. They're probably not numbers. Oh, you're right. You're right. You're absolutely right. Because we did the other type is what happened here. Okay. All right. All right. Can I just unwrap that? I think I need to implement deref for unwrap. I did this. I'm sorry for making you type things explicitly. No, it's totally cool. My brain just wasn't, you know, there because I usually don't do that. So it wasn't like, you know how there are things where you just like see an error and you know why it exists? I don't have that for typing everything like this. So it takes me a second to debug what I did. Unsatisfied trait bounds again, because these are not numbers again. But that's not the error that I was looking for. I found out to restart Rust Analyzer like every day when I do AOC. It's really interesting. I've never really had this many problems with Rust Analyzer. I think it's because I'm just creating new crates and I'm not restarting every time. Like if this was just a workspace and not a individual crate for each day, I think it would have behaved better. Okay, so let's do... Oh, we don't need to implement unwrap. We don't need to do that. We can just do this. We also don't want that, though. I did the same thing we just did before. Okay, so now we're just failing our test. What's the difference between .0 and .1 there? So if you look at the types here, because Rust Analyzer is working now, there is an initial position and a num crabs in this tuple. This tuple exists because we iterated over the B tree map. The B tree map gives us a tuple of key and value. So when we do .next, which is the iterator function implementation trait thing, we get a key and a value in a tuple, right? Because we're iterating over the whole thing. When we do .last, we get the same thing. We get a key and a value. So what we're doing here is we're saying take the first position in the tuple. So this is tuple access syntax. So .0 would be an initial position and .1 would be num crabs. You know what I just realized would be really cool? If I had a teleprompter and the YouTube chat was on the teleprompter, then I could look up and read chat and look like at chat. I might do that, actually. That sounds like a great idea. Because then it'll look like I'm actually talking to you instead of talking to the YouTube chat on the monitor over here. Okay, so we're iterating over. We got every position. I'm going to call this goal position. Oh, it's a tuple, and initial position is also a tuple of length 1, so it gets the value in the same way. Yes. So dot 0 here gets the initial position because it's a tuple, and dot 0 gets the initial position value because it's also a tuple. Sounds like you just need another monitor right by your camera. Right. A teleprompter, Jacob. A teleprompter is another monitor right by my camera. Actually, in the optimal position. No, I've tried actually putting monitors right next to the camera, and I never quite get it to work. So maybe I can get a small monitor and just hook it up, but I still need like a teleprompter-y like thing to look into. Okay, so we've got the goal position, right? And then we're going to have crabs.iter dot map key value I'm semi-joking, Jacob, but also kind of not. Let total movement equals crabs.iter, and this is going to be dot sum. So what we're going to do here is take the initial position, right? Let's name these because you've talked about getting a teleprompter for video recording before too. Yes. Low key, I ordered one last night because I don't know, shits and giggles. So I'm actually going to have a cheap one soon. But we'll see. We'll see if it does anything. Initial position num crabs. We need to take the initial position of the crab and get the absolute value of subtracting it from minus goal position abs so this is also one of the things where type aliases kind of come in to play. So like because this is a new type, we have to typing .0.0.0. With a type alias, you don't have to do that. Let the change in x position equal the initial position dot 0 minus the goal position. But this is going to be like a U8, right? Did I misspell this? Is that what it's telling me? Oh, come on. Rust compiler to the rescue. Okay, so the initial position could be greater than the goal position, right? Or it could be less than the goal position. So these need to be like as I 32 or something like that, right? I'm just putting them in a larger type. Yada yada. Why is Rust Analyzer still think there's an error there? Okay, so we're mapping over the initial position and the number of crabs. Was just going to ask if you needed to manually cast the nums to handle the negative. Yes, we need to manually cast the nums because we're doing subtraction here and we might go negative. We're immediately converting back to positive, and I'm using a number that is, or a number type that is bigger than the number that we're using. So I think what I'm casting like a U16 to an I32 should work just fine. All of these numbers, again, are less than 4 digits. So I think an I16 also would have worked. I just went up for safety, basically. And then I can go back later and deal with it. So dx abs. So this is the change, right? And then we need to do dx times numCrabs.0. So that's the amount that it's going to cost us. If we have a crab at 4 and it has to move to 2, that's a cost of 2. If we have 5 crabs there, that's a cost of 10. And these aren't the same. So I'm just going to cast this. Did I mess up? What did I do here? Is numCrabs a U32? Is that what I did? I guess technically this is always going to be positive, right? So total movement is a U32. Anyway. I think this will bite us if we do a U16 here. Dot sum total movement is a U32. dx is always going to be positive. So if we make this a U32 and we do this as U32, I'm surprised abs doesn't convert. I mean, I'm not surprised, I guess, but it would be nice if abs converted. So this is totals. Is there any benefit in pre-allocating your arrays, iterators, in Rust? I know some languages have trivial overhead for expanding things. There are cases where you want to pre-allocate an array. For example, when we were working with the ND array a couple days ago, it would prefer that we don't go kind of like into a vec into an array. So to get past that, well, okay. So the way that I'll phrase it is that you have two options, right? If you know how much memory you're going to require, pre-allocating that memory is going to be better, right? In space usage, in terms of complexity and whatever, right? If you can pre-allocate and you know how much you're going to use, then pre-allocating is going to run better, basically. If you don't know, then you're using something like a vec, in which case you are going to at some point potentially trigger like the requirement that you grab more memory, right? So like Nikki says, you don't have to pay the cost of expanding the heap allocation if you pre-allocate the amount of space that you need. It's a trade-off, basically. And the Rust compiler is also super smart. So I would say if you're concerned about the performance of something, measure it, change it, measure it again, rather than assuming that whatever you do is going to be better. As we saw earlier in Advent of Code, actually, when we switched from read to string to buffered line reading, it didn't really change materially the things that we were looking at. So it's always good, like whenever you're making a performance improvement, have your benchmarks, have your heap allocation profiling, have everything set up first, measure, make the change, and then test again. What am I doing here? These are going to be total movements. All right. Rust Analyzer still wants to be unhappy. There we go. I don't know why Rust Analyzer is so hung up on this one line. I don't know. Maybe it's the new types or something. Okay, so we've got the totals, right? And the lowest cost that we have, it looks like 37. Is that the number we actually needed for our test? It is. So if we do, instead of collect, we do min, we get sum 37. Expected U64 found option. That's fine. I mean, we're just going to unwrap this because it has to succeed. But we're going to change the type to be a U32 because that's what we have. And we don't have any other constraints, so we can do whatever we want. It works, but Rust Analyzer ain't happy. Yes, Rust Analyzer is not happy for whatever reason. It's like no field 0 on type and U64. So Rust Analyzer clearly has some trouble with new types. And is having trouble resolving this numCrabs import actually as well. Why min-max are options? Because if you have an iterator of nothing, you get nothing from the min, right? If you have a 0 element iterator and you want to look for the smallest element, there is no element. Therefore, there is no smallest element. All right, let's get our actual code here. Our actual input. Get rid of that. Input.text. Cargo run part 1. Okay, let's see if this is our answer. Hopefully it is. If it's not, then I did something wrong, obviously. Yeah, it's our answer. Crabs don't seem interested in your proposed solution. Perhaps you misunderstand crab engineering. Oh. I will defer to the crabs as a Rust programmer. I will let the crabs tell me what is correct. As it turns out, crab submarine engines don't burn fuel at a constant rate. Instead, each change of one step in the horizontal costs 1 more unit of fuel than the last. First step costs 1, second step costs 2, third step costs 3, and so on. As each crab moves, moving farther becomes more expensive. This changes the best horizontal position to align them all on. For example, this becomes 5. Hopefully that looks like the original input. So we're looking for 168 now. Let's copy this. We'll do new file part2 .rs. Paste this in. We have the same stuff here. We have 168 is now the number that we're looking for. Oops. So let's cargo run or cargo test bin part 2 to make sure that our test fails first. And then we go back into here and we have to recalculate the cost. So we've got the differential here. And then this is cost is the differential. Is it just +1 each time? So it is 0 ... equals dx dot sum, right? Unsatisfied trait bounds. 0 ... dx. Cost is 1 + 2 + 3 + 4 for how many steps there are. Yeah, so we have the change, right? We have the number of steps. And then we just need to add them together. I don't know that that's an inclusive whatever, but this needs parentheses because, you know, it does. Consider giving cost a type. What if we put cost here? Can you infer the type for us? No, cannot infer the type for us. Damn it. Can we do U32 here? We can do U32 here, and our test is passing. So that was it. We just needed to sum them up. One ... equals dx there. I mean, yeah, I guess. 0 doesn't count anyway. So now do we just run this again? This is going to be one of those things where it just runs forever because I wrote the wrong thing. All we added was sum, right? This will finish. When? Okay, there we go. I'm gonna run it with the release build if this is the answer. But huzzah, that's the answer. So that's all we had to do, basically. Just sum them up and change the cost. That range some think is inspired. It was just, yeah, I don't know. I happened to notice that, I don't know, I already have the dx, or like I already have the change. So that gives us all of the numbers if it's just +1 for each one of them. You just sum them. I don't know. I don't know how you would get to that if I didn't just like randomly think of it. But this is what I was curious about the benchmarks. Okay, so let's do benchmarking. Let's start off with the heap stuff because we already have the heap stuff implemented. Day 7 README. Yeah, I just thought it was a nifty way to express it. Yes. One of the things that you do get used to, Derek, as you use like more functional languages more, is having functions like that just like sitting around, right? Like a sum on an iterator is just a thing that should exist. And that eventually gets lodged in the back of your head. So if you have a thing and you need to add them all together in some way, you just sum them up. You don't have to like for loop and add everything together and whatever. And that, I think, realistically, I think that's the key insight of like, or the key takeaway to functional programming in the general sense. It's that you can write things declaratively without having to like manually pick everything up. Which means that, hey, we just sum this together is much more readable than like for whatever in whatever, mutate this, add 5 to it, or whatever it is, right? It's one of the reasons that I describe like understanding collect and how containers work with respect to collect. Like you can collect to a string, which is a container, but also like a vec or like a B-tree map or like whatever. Like understanding how one data structure can transform into another data structure, and thinking in terms of the data structures and not the operations that it takes to get from one to the other, is a really powerful thing that you pick up more and more as you learn more Rust and any functional language in general, actually. All right, so we did this target release part 1, target release part 2. I mean, we are using like 11, 14 kilobytes, and we're not changing. Like either one doesn't change. So part 1, part 2. Okay, so we've got the original solutions here. We'll do Criterion, I suppose, since I said that we were going to do that at some point. So those types don't take up any space, it seems. Great way to show the zero abstraction cost thing. The types don't take up any space. Can we just put this in here like this? Repr transparent, right? Do I need a whole new one? I thought I could just put it in there. Unknown starter token, because I messed something up. The numcrab's U16 takes up the same size as a bare U16 would. What is it, 14.883, 807? So yeah, the Rust compiler is smart enough to know that it should do that and remove it or orient it in a way. I do love the zero cost abstraction focus that Rust has, because it means that like I never actually need to worry about that. Or like not never. Like when we're doing Advent of Code, there was a couple days ago where we had to care about the runtime, right? But we fixed that by changing the algorithm, not by optimizing the representation of our structs and stuff like that. So like, I really, really like being able to write high level code just like I write in JavaScript, but getting the performance that the Rust compiler is capable of giving, and the optimizations that the Rust compiler is capable of making, because of the whole type system and the ownership model and all of that kind of stuff. Criterion, right? That's what we were doing. We need two things. Criterion uses a custom benchmark harness. So we are going to need two things in our cargo toml for day 7. And these will be a new dev dependency of Criterion and a new benchmark. We're calling it my benchmark apparently, which is fine. I don't really care. But we're turning the test harness off. The test harness, so in Rust, there's a thing called the test harness. The test harness is when you have tests like we do in part 1, right? Or part 2, where you have config tests, mod tests, whatever. You have like a bunch of test annotations and stuff like that. The test harness is the thing that defines, that grabs all of those things in a binary. So it's basically a main.rs specifically for testing, and then decides how to run those. So when we turn the harness off, we get to use somebody else's main.rs to determine how to run our benchmarks. Apparently we can't compile because cargo is broken. Oh, right. Cargo is now checking to make sure that we have the my benchmark file, which we don't have. So let's do this. Benches is a special directory. So make dir benches, touch benches, my benchmark .rs. I'm just going to paste let's see if that worked. I really like new shell, I have to say. Like, this is so much more readable than like PB paste, like angle bracket. Do you use one angle bracket or two angle brackets? Like, which one appends, which one overwrites? This is just like, save it out to this file. And then you're done. Okay, so if we run cargo bench now, this should download Criterion and then not fail because I don't think we import anything that we don't need. So this is going to run a Fibonacci benchmark because that was the example, but it'll give us a second to kind of look at what Criterion actually looks like when we want to run it. So basically, there's a couple of things here, right? So there, we pull in the Criterion trait. The Criterion main is, I believe, the test harness. The Criterion group is kind of like the groups of benchmarks that we're running. Black box is really, really important. So black box is a way for us to say, hey, Rust compiler, do this work no matter what, and do not optimize it out, right? So it treats basically this function call as something that it shouldn't, like, dead code optimize, right? So if we never use the value that comes out of the like the black box function, totally fine, just run the code anyway. Whereas normally, if we didn't use a value and we didn't use a function, Rust compiler would take that out of our binary and actually just not run it at all, which is really cool and really great for production use, but it's really not what we want when we want to run benchmarks. We want to run functions that don't that we don't use at the end, basically. So Fibonacci 20 takes 25 nanoseconds on the lower bound, 25 nanoseconds, I guess, on average or mean. I don't know which one that is. And 25 nanoseconds at the high end, right? So we've got this kind of cool thing, which is like, we've got fib 20 and then times it took. So fib 20 is our bench function. And then we take our bench function and we're iterating over the Fibonacci, right? So where is my code? So we do this in part 1. I wonder if we can do this through crates. I don't actually know if we can pull this function out of part 1. We might need to put it in the library. Yeah, I don't think we can reach into the binary to do the testing. So we have to take this function and we have to move it. We're going to name it process part 1. I'll put this in here, process part 1. In lib, I will drop it in here. It'll be pub function process part 1. So we have to change the way our code is organized a little bit to be able to do this. We don't have a couple of imports here anymore because we're just pulling in the part 1 processing. This test feels a little weird to have in here now, right? So we're going to take that and we're going to put it in lib. This is going to be part 1. The pre-allocations were making me use a bunch of usizes, so cutting that piece out took 7,000 bytes. Yeah. So if you pre-allocate space you don't need, you will pre-allocate space you don't need, right? Let's see. So let's do the run here again, just so that we have our build happening. I don't think that matters actually, now that I think about it. So let's do, here's our function, right? This function takes the input and does whatever. We're gonna black box, I guess let's do the full input, right? Let's do the input.text here. Const input, you're supposed to do input all caps here. So I'm gonna do that. Include stir input.text. Great. And then we're going to use, I guess this is going to be called day 5. Ignore the fact that it's called day 5. Sorry. And then we're going to call process part 1 with a black box on input. And this is going to be part 1. So if we run cargo bench now, it should run that a bunch of times with the release profile and stuff. My hope when I requested benchmarks was to see the part 1 and optimized part 2 take the same amount of time. Oh, so you already... Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. So this takes 7 milliseconds. Is that because we have the debug on in our release? I feel like it should take less than 7 milliseconds for part 1. So you mean the optimized part 2 as in like the mathematical approach to part 2? The Gauss distribution or something like that? Cool. I don't know how to do the Gauss distribution yet, so we have to go look that up. Okay, so we're looking at... Oh, also one of the things that Criterion does that I totally forgot it does, which is absolutely amazing, is like, so it gives us this part 1, right? And then it gives us the time that it ran, and it gives you the change, like the percentage change. Yeah, you can drop me a link. I'm not concerned about solving the problem myself at this point. I want to see and learn the proper mathematical approach now that we've solved it. But if you make a change and you keep running your benchmarks, like I was saying before, if you run it and then you make a change and you run it again, you can see how much change there actually is between the two by default. So we just got 8% better by removing the debug from the release, which we need the debug from the release for the heat profiling, but you know. And now we're seeing like basically the same. Okay, so this is what you wanted me to look at. Arithmetic progression or arithmetic sequence as a sequence of numbers such that the difference between the consecutive terms is constant. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, like all of that kind of stuff. So A plus n minus 1 times D. So if we look at what we have for part 1, oh, the formula under sum. Where's sum? Sum. The sum of members of a finite arithmetic progression is called an arithmetic series. For example, consider the sum 2, 5, 8, 11, 14. This sum can be found quickly by taking the n number of terms being added, here 5, multiplying by the sum of the first and the last number in the progression, here 2 plus 14 equals 16, and dividing by 2. So because we have what? The change, like we have dx, n equals dx, a1 equals 1, an equals dx. So you're saying the change, which is the arithmetic series, so dx, the first number and the last number, so like I guess that's why we need 1, so like 1 and 7, so 8 over 2. So let me see let's run this on, okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run the Criterion benchmarks for part 2 in the same way that we ran part 1 so that we get the numbers. And then I'll change the implementation and then we'll go from there. Get rid of this. Drop this in here, and this will be part 2 test demo data. This is process part 2. This is pub, right? Yes, that's pub. Process part 2. We aren't importing it. Process part 2. Okay. So now part 1 and part 2 are like not interesting at all in terms of actual code. And I think I'm going to keep that going forward. So the part 1 and part 2 binaries are just going to be like setup to call this process function. So we still need to set up FN Criterion benchmark, seed up bench function. Can we just do this? And I'll open this up and see what we get. For example, 3 steps is 1 plus 2 plus 3. So that's 3 times 1 plus 3 over 2. Okay. Performance regressed. So these two seem like they're taking approximately the same time. And this is why you run your benchmarks multiple times, by the way. Because even when you get like results here, these results might be because we're running any number of things on the computer at the same time, etc. Right? Like performance regressed in part 2 and we only ran it twice, like doesn't seem right to me. But we are taking about 7 milliseconds and 8 milliseconds. So we'll call it like a 1 millisecond difference here, because I think that's approximately what we got the last time too. Actually, part 2, yeah. So we're approximately 1 millisecond difference between part 1 and part 2. Let's run it one more time just for kicks. And in the meantime, I'll take a look at the Criterion stuff. There is a getting started guide here. Yada yada, add benchmark, run benchmark, details. So this page right here, the Criterion, so Criterion has a whole book. It's a deep library in the sense that like there's a lot to it. Bench function method defines a benchmark with a name and a closure. Name should be unique across all of the benchmarks. The closure must accept one argument, the bencher. Bencher performs the benchmark. Ooh, there's an option to compare the performance of 2 functions. That's kind of cool. We probably won't get into that today, but maybe next time. Is this benchmarking picoseconds? Is that what PS is down here? I'm pretty sure I didn't get picoseconds when I benchmarked the Fibonacci. This Mac is also on its way out, so that could be a contributing factor. That's part 1. Part 1. Fib 20 in nanoseconds. 25 nanoseconds. So it runs slower on my computer than whatever computer they use to write this documentation, which is kind of hilarious. So I'm just going to copy these into our README for kicks. I really don't think that summing is going to have a large impact on the performance of this, but we will find out either way. Criterion and this. And we will take this and drop it into part 2, Criterion. Criterion, so easy to use, it makes you think you know what you're doing. Okay, so you're telling me that the cost function is the thing that we need to optimize here? Unless you're saying that this is capable of being done on the entire group somehow? Okay, the cost function. So instead of dot sum, we take dx and we do to let new cost so we let cost equals dx times, do we need to do a so this is on the total number of crabs, I guess. Initial position and goal position. Line 73. So it's just calculating the cost of one crab? Or is it calculating the cost of all crabs? Nikki. Dx times 1 plus dx over 2. Dx times 1 plus dx over 2. I'm just going to trust that that's correct. So you're saying that this, let's test. Carto test. Make sure that our tests still pass with this cost logic. Test it first, yes. Make sure it's correct before we benchmark it. Because if it's like the other day and I remove all the functionality and then benchmark it, that's not going to be good. I don't know. I don't feel like this is going to be a significant change, I guess. We only did it on part 2, right? Yeah. So I guess part 2 comes down to 7 milliseconds. So we did drop a millisecond, about 13%. Found a way to improve part 1 to less than 10,000 Tmax. What do we have here? We have 14K. Yeah, we should definitely explore that a little bit as well. It's also TG max. With arithmetic sum. I should have committed this before I did that. Oh well. So where's our part? It seems like such a small piece to optimize. So actually part 1 doesn't even get the arithmetic sum then, right? Okay, so all that code is pushed up. What did you end up doing to get the Gmax down, Derek? So totals. Yes, you're right. I found someone's solution in R last night when people were talking about the math, and it let me cut the map out, which was cool. Cut the map out. Oh, you mean the map that you used for sum? So instead of .sum, you had like a map over it and you were... I guess your benefit from that is smaller because you do the cost times num crabs thing. I did that calculation for every crab on the input list. We are doing it for every crab on the input list. Especially for part one, the optimal solution is the median of all crabs' position. The median? Maybe I don't remember what median is. Maybe I'm thinking of mode. Median is the value separating the higher half from the lower half of a data sample. Okay, so what is it? Math.round everything over 2? Yep, so you can calculate the distance from each crab to the median instead of doing it. So if there were 100 crabs, instead of doing it 100 times, you could do it 91 time. Gotcha. Is there a way to do median in Rust? There are statistics crates that I don't use, so offhand. Yeah, I guess it's just length over 2, isn't it? So what is that? So in this sense, is it length plus 1 over 2 value? Okay, so it's the value at the halfway point of all crabs. So instead of counting the number of crabs in the B tree, we would leave them all. Or, yeah, that sounds right. I think what you're talking about is if we didn't do this B tree map, right? So if let's test this for a second. Puzzle input 2. Instead of doing a B tree map, we just return the vec initial positions. If I could spell, that would be great. Initial positions. Which is just crabs, right? Let's just make this a U16 just for the moment. And then if we process part 1 opt 2, this will be a thing. Crabs is going to be a vec. We have the input positions. And then we do crabs dot length over 2. Actually, let's leave the other logic. So you're saying let crabs.length over 2, like round that. I guess this is integer division. I don't know if integer division always goes lower. Sort it first. It's already it was not sorted because it's not the B tree anymore. We still need the B tree though, right? Because we still need to do the actual calculation. So the process part 2 that I did up here actually doesn't matter. Or not doesn't matter, but if we're gonna have to sort anyway, we can do this. We can do the same thing that we had before, so we don't need puzzle input 2. We can just use puzzle input. And if we call this opt2, then we puzzle input. Optimal crab position is, I use sort unstable because it doesn't allocate, but sort works too. Okay. We're keeping the num crabs around. We actually do need a second version of this that doesn't. So the B tree map actually isn't what we want, and I do want the other thing. So we do need to sort. The problem with doing this on stream ad hoc. Puzzle input 2 is what I called it. Is that right? Let's get rid of this underscore because that's not how I write everything else. So part 1, opt2, optimal crab position is crabs dot length over 2, and then position index this doesn't have like a median, does it? We can just get the index, it's fine, but at the same time it would be cool if the iterator trait had like median on it. This is statistical stuff. That's not what we want. So it looks like it doesn't. So we have min max. No median. What is num crabs? The input is a list of positions. The number of crabs is just the length of that list. No. Yes. So the way that we did part 1 originally, without the median, is we kept the number of crabs around so that we could multiply. So we had a B tree map of the initial position and the number of crabs at that position. And then we calculated the change from each of those positions to a given position, which means that we needed the number of crabs in that position to calculate the score for moving that set of crabs to whatever point it was. It's not the total number of crabs, it's the number of crabs at a specific spot on the x-axis. So in this case, crabs.leng. Oh, this is process part 1. I'm in the wrong spot. So crabs.length over 2. The thing that I was going to look up is Rust integer division. This is the wrong thing. Integer division that rounds up. I guess we can just detect if the length is even. So crabs dot length over 2. So match crabs dot length. The median will probably only work on a flat list of values. I only have a flat list of values at this point. You think n plus 1 over 2 works because floor? Ah, so you're saying that even if it's even and we do it, it'll round lower, and if it's odd and we do it, it'll round higher? That makes sense. Crabs dot lang plus 1 over 2 with parens in the right spots. So that's the index we want, which means that we don't have to do this. If it ends on a 0.5, it'll round low. Yes. Because integer division. So optimal crab index. We still need the B tree, right? To do this, if we're going to use the same... we don't need the B tree? So we don't need the B tree because... oh, we can just calculate every crab now. I guess. It doesn't matter. The B tree would just be an optimization there. Okay, I get it. So let's go... yeah. So let's do optimal crab position index. Min and max, I don't think we need anymore, right? Which means that this goal position we already have. So we'll call this goal position. Actually, no. Let goal position equals crabs dot iter at I at optimal crab position index. Is at not a thing? I'm missing something. Rust iterator. You just use a fold at this point? Don't you need the crab position first? I do need to sort before getting it, but you do need the crab position, right? You can do something like this anyway. Let's not bench that. Where's the test? Sort, total movement, not a problem. Not our thing right now. Not our thing right now. Oh, Vec has a sort. That makes sense. Then we have get, because get is on Vec. And mute Vec does? Yes. That's what I just did. Okay, so we have goal position. We don't need initial position anymore, right? Yes, we only have initial position. We don't need dumb crabs. We don't need 0 because we're using U16s. And then it's just dx. Total is not found in the scope. Makes sense. Total movement. Is this just Rust Analyzer being annoying? Cannot cast as whatever. Okay. This. Probably also this. Goal position comes from get, right? So this will always be here. We'll just unwrap for the moment. I feel a little bit bad about unwrapping everywhere, but I also want it to be like, I want people to know that it's okay when you're just learning to just unwrap. So if I use unwrap and I'm teaching Rust and stuff, then people feel comfortable using unwrap. And like, I don't want people to think that unwrap is the best solution, but I also don't want them to feel pressured to have to deal with result types and option types and like when they're just learning. Okay. Process part 1, op 2. This should work. Let's do this. Looks like it passed. Let's go to our benchmarks. I'm keeping around the old ones now so that we can actually compare. Process part 1, opt 2. Is that what I called it? It is. I just need to import it. So we'll bench it. We already tested to make sure that it actually does work. So when you're handling errors and user-facing stuff, are you still using air or would you move to Miet now? For Toast, I'm moving to Miet. For generally teaching people, I'm using air. I'm using air to generally teach people because it's a little bit simpler, is the way that I'll put it. It's more established, it's more mature. It's more likely that when I teach people air and color air, that it will be around in the same form in 6 months. So that's why I teach air. Miet went through 3 major revisions, I think inside of like a month or something like that. So I wasn't sure if Miet was going to have a stable API in the longer term. So I'm waiting to see that before I start including it in like educational material. But for production usage, I'm using Miet in the NAPI RS version of Toast. So that's what I'm doing. Okay, Okay, so we've got 53 nanoseconds now on part 2 op 2 instead of 7 milliseconds. So let's do the same for part 2. I bet you the space is totally different here too. But let's find out. Let's do space after we do Criterion again for part 2. Because I need to re-enable the debug flag, and I haven't done that yet. Although this, the only thing that changes is the cost, right? So it would have been nice to write this in a way that was reusable, but I didn't, so rip. Then we'll go back and we'll grab this. We'll return this instead. And we will test this because we have to test, right? If we don't test, we don't know that it did the thing that we expected it to do. The weight changes how it works. Oh, right, we didn't actually... That's part 2. What do you mean we can't use the same solution for part 2? Oh, you mean the median doesn't work for part 2. Gotcha. So the shortcut of using the median doesn't actually give us the right position. Gotcha. I'm happy we did it the first way then. The first time. Instead of trying to optimize it first. Okay, so if that's the case, then let's do the heap. Yeah. Optimal distance for part 1 is the median because median is the shortest distance. Got it. Did I just delete part 1 up 2? I did. Get rid of the vec deck. And then I think that that's all that we have here, right? Yes. Okay, so let's go back into Cargo Toml and turn this back on. We'll do release with that. And we will run target release part 1. That's not what I wanted to do. New file part 1 opt2.rs. And then this will do process part 1 opt2. I think the paper Rustlang suggests that you can use the mean to calculate the distance and then multiply it by the cost calcs you did. Test it out later. That'll be interesting. Opt2. So we drop it down to 7K and 10K. So instead of 4, or I guess we'll call this 15 and 12, we get 10 and 7. Not bad. But this one runs in 53 nanoseconds. So we get down to 53 nanoseconds for this one. We use a little bit less heap, but not like an amazingly amount of smaller heap. So yeah, let's take a look at this this little paper thing for a second. In this paper, we discussed the problem of minimizing the fuel expenditure required to bring us blah, blah, blah. The mean provides a very near estimate of optimal points for the minimization of fuel expenditure, but is not always optimal. The reason for this approach is unreasonable efficacy and ultimate inadequacy are also discussed. Oh, so the mean gets you close, but doesn't always get you the right value, is what this paper is saying. So we get, it gets you within plus or minus 1/2. 1/2 of what? So basically a ton of equations and how they progress through the equations. But no conclusion. Yeah, but plus or minus, you mean like plus or minus 0.5? Like, what do you mean by a half? Like a half of what? The last, there is no conclusion in this paper, guys. Like, academic papers have sections. This has 2 headings, and neither of them, like none of them are, we'll say organized. So yes, okay, there's an abstract-ish, but there is no, this is not a, definitely not a published paper. This is like a CS student's proof. Yeah, this is just like a blog post formatted as a paper. This is not a paper, in my opinion. Not to trash on the person that did it. I'm sure that the work is great and it's interesting stuff to read for sure. But it is not, it's not like an academic paper. It's like they wrote a blog post and they happened to write the blog post in LaTeX or LaTeX. It must be the case that the fuel expenditure of all N crab submarines must be obtained by summing the expenditures of each individual submarine, so the total fuel expenditure of the crab submachines F of K is given by the sum from I to N of F I K, which is the amount of fuel expended by a set of N crab submarines without initial positions in moving to a point K. Yeah, that's not a conclusion, guys. That's, am I on the wrong page maybe? Here we go. It is now valuable to note that this is precisely the mean of x of I, which we denote x with a little line across it. So x with the little line is the mean, which means that the mean plus a half is greater than or equal to k is greater than or equal to the mean minus a half. What is k? In other words, given f of k, we wish to find some k which minimizes f. So k is the answer? Yeah, but is k the fuel expenditure or is k the index? Like, it's a 1 point k. On the dynamics of crab submarines. They don't discuss the drawbacks. They said they were going to discuss the drawbacks somewhere. The reason for this approach is unreasonable efficacy and the ultimate inadequacy are also discussed, but they don't seem to get to the inadequacy. Eliminating this term is intractable. I guess that's their discussion of the inadequacy. It's now valuable to note that this equation is precisely the mean of the x of I, which we denote as x. This gives us a simplified form, but unfortunately another term position. K as a whole number affects things too. But K... As such, the second term is maximally equal to 1/2 and minimally equal to negative 1/2. They call it a sufficiently tight bound, but they also say that it's inadequate. So does this actually give you the answer or not, is the question. Okay, well, they don't provide, in my opinion, enough examples to actually be able to determine what they're talking about. They provide a bunch of equations and how they got to the end, but as is the case with actual papers sometimes, you actually do have to put this into practice to figure out where it breaks down. What it's saying is solve this problem with the mean, one less, one more. One of these three will be correct, but which one, I don't know. It's saying only a half, though, and a half doesn't get you to a full number. Right? Unless a half covers two numbers, right? So if k is 5.5, right? Then we're looking at 5 and 6. Could be possible numbers. So I guess you could use this to get down to potentially doing 2 executions. At most. It's interesting. It's no closed solution for part 2, and we need to try a couple of different values. People are taking away that it is within 0.5 of the actual index, I suppose. which means you actually have to take 2 positions. Okay, that makes sense. Because we're interested in integer solutions, you need to check 3 values: round mean minus 1, and round mean plus 1. So this is something they need to have called out in the paper, in my opinion. Like, cool, it bounds to negative 0.5 and 0.5, but because they're talking about this specific problem and the fact that we're using integers and they never mention that, detracts from the value of the paper in my, like this isn't a half if we have to apply 1 and negative 1 to it, right? In practice. And this is actually a problem with academic papers. If you're trying to apply them in industry code, you end up having to work this out in practice and see what it actually means and see where it actually falls down when you write the code. And what you end up with is like Paxos in practice is slightly different than Paxos in academic theory, for example, and things like that. Like the implementation details aren't in the papers. So you end up having to figure those out as you actually do them. And I wish that more papers were written with like, this is a very simple example of it. This is like the mean plus half and the mean minus half, but the actual application is mean plus 1 and mean minus 1. Very cool though. So yeah, I think that's it for us. We did everything. We did a couple of different, we're starting to use Criterion now, so we'll use Criterion moving forward, I think. I'll probably use the library here and a couple of binaries for each of the options. I definitely don't think this paper holds up to rigor, but it's interesting that the change to the weight switches from median to mean. Yes, it is interesting that we can use median to get an exact value in one of them, and the mean gives us almost an exact value in the other one. It was cool seeing Criterion. Yes, Criterion is a super dope piece of software. I think that we should do more with it moving forward. And one of the things that I really want to get across during the Advent of Code stuff is that it's actually super easy to test, to benchmark, to heap profile. Like these are all very approachable things. And like reading the results might take you a second and you might need to learn to interpret things. But actually doing it, like actually getting the values out and doing the benchmarking and doing the profiling is totally approachable and is a totally tractable problem. Whereas I feel like with a lot of maybe even just node stuff, people feel like benchmarking and profiling and testing and things like that become very difficult. Often because we have to pull in third-party libraries or like compile native dependencies or like do things like that, right? Like the debugger situation in Node.js, for example, is not something that everybody uses because it's kind of difficult to get up and running. And it's kind of difficult to understand like what Chrome profiles are even giving you, for example. And it's definitely hard to figure out how to automate things like Chrome profiles or even just Lighthouse, right? So I think it's really interesting that Rust provides the framework for this to just be like a thing that we do, right? There's a benchmarks folder, we throw Criterion in, we have a little bit of scaffolding, and we throw our functions into the benchmark. And then it gives us statistical runtimes based on a number of runs, right? For the heap profiling and stuff, we throw in the dat dependency, we profile our release with the bug, and then we can get the dat JSON file and throw it into an HTML page. Like these are very, very doable things, I think. Even if you really don't understand what you're doing, which I think is one of the real big powers of Rust when it comes down to it. It's about empowering people to do things that they couldn't do before, more than being a C alternative or like whatever you want to call that. Do you need profile.release debug equals 1 for dat to work? Yes. Because you want the release profile, but you want the debug symbols, I believe. If we don't do debug, let's see what happens, just for kicks. I've definitely not been doing that and getting DAT results back. Are you opening them in the HTML viewer, or are you just getting like the CLI output? What is yup? That was not a yes or no question, Derek. You've been doing both. Okay, so let's take a look. Source line debug info is what this is. So my guess is that we look at this, and when we look for the lines that it relates to in our source code, we don't see those. Day 7, dat heap, open. Part 1 main. You see this question mark right here? Specifically? Like in our code, there is a source line at which this allocation happens. If you don't include the debug stuff, you don't get this line number. So I'll do that again with the stuff enabled, just to show that. So now you see part 1 RS, line 15, column 20. Is there a way to only include the debug stuff when using DAT, or does it not matter? We've just been using it. Whether it matters or not is probably up to the particular thing that you're doing. Let's look a little bit at... this isn't... Is this? So debug corresponds to the C debug info flag, which controls the amount of debug information included in the compiled library. Debug symbols, of course, make the binary bigger. How much bigger? Open question, but it does make it bigger, because if you didn't have them, then you wouldn't need them. I think you can configure things to happen with certain features. You can, I don't know if you can do it with the profiles. You can do custom profiles though, it looks like. So let's do that for a second. Let's do, instead of the feature flag, let's do cargo test, cargo bench, cargo install, cargo build. How do we specify profile in the CLI? The test one mentions debug with release. Yes, so this is rustlang.org cargo reference profiles. Let's grab the profile release stuff. So instead of doing profile release, we can do profile dot dat. So now we get an error because I mistyped something. When defining a custom profile, you must specify the inheritance key. Gotcha. So here, instead of doing all of this stuff, we'll do inherits release debug 1. Named profiles is required. Not stabilized. Interesting. When did this become a thing? What version of Cargo am I using? 1.56. Okay, let's do this. What extension gives you those check marks in your Cargo toml? That is an extension called Crates or something. Let me extensions Rust maybe. That's toml Crates. It's called Crates. You think 157 is out now? Well, it works for nightly. It looks like. Although the DAT profile is features equals DAT. So the command gets longer to run, but we can include the DAT profile now, and then we don't have to worry about the release profile, which is used for benchmarking as well, being like interfered with. So that's probably how I'm going to do it moving forward. We'll have a profile.dat. Whenever we want to use dat, we'll use plus nightly, or I will upgrade Rust for the next stream. I'm not going to upgrade Rust on stream because that's ridiculous. But yes. So basically what we ended up with is a Cargo nightly version because 1.56 doesn't have the profile feature. The profile dat inherits release. We could probably also... Is there a default features here? Like that? No. Feature... I feel like there's a features in profiles, right? Maybe not. So we still have to add the feature ourselves. There is no, we can't default features for profile, which is fine. Can confirm 157 is out now. Yes, it definitely is. Yeah, cool. So we've got profile.dat now. You know what I'm gonna do later off stream? I'm going to create a Cargo generate GitHub repo for doing Advent of Code stuff, and it's just going to set up part 1, part 2 benchmarks dat with the profiles and everything. That seems like a really good idea. So I'll probably record that, so look for that on the channel sometime soon if you're interested in doing a Cargo generate Git repo. I'm going to actually be doing a couple of those, so I'll probably do a Cargo generate for like Netlify serverless functions, for Advent of Code, I guess, for probably like a CLI with struct_opt or something like that. And I know, yeah, I know that a couple of you have been like kind of using the scaffolding for DAT and things like that I've been using on stream. So I'll let you know when I do that. And if you want to use it, you can use it. If you want to keep doing your own thing, keep doing your own thing. And we'll be back tomorrow, same time, I think, like 10 a.m. Yeah, 10 a.m. tomorrow, same time. Have a good rest of your day, y'all.